Hello and welcome back to the Business Notes series by CapableCo, where we give you ideas that might help make your business fitter. So, today I thought we could talk about some of the newer innovation systems, and ultimately, while talking about them, we can try and combine a few of them into our ultimate innovation system. So, over here on the left, I'm showing some important innovation systems which have come out in recent history, and that's kind of a relative term. But I'd have to say that when I did my MBA in the noughties, that these were touched upon only briefly. And so if you look at their impact in the real world, they're probably more important than they were made out to be during those courses. So ultimately, we're going to try and distill that down into a combined system that we're going to use, remembering that whatever system you come up with itself should be iterated upon and steadily improved over time. So whatever system you come up with is likely to be wrong to start with, and you need to improve on it over time. So if we just start at the top left here, lean manufacturing, it's one of the oldest ones. It comes from Toyota, as I understand it. And it's been associated with decreased waste, improvements in quality, such that companies like BMW say that they wish they could have the quality, and that's what their target is, to have quality as good as Toyota's. Now, one of the less appreciated points about it, which I'd just like to point out as a key thing that we want to drag from lean over to the combined system that we're going to have in the future, is the amount of staff participation. So in the lean system, it seems to me that everybody is a team member. Stop the manufacturing when something goes wrong, when one person in your team realizes there's something wrong. In Japan, they measure the number of ideas that the team members come up with. And for example, the sorts of numbers that we're talking about are like 100 ideas from an average team member. So the amount of communication and integration of creative ideas far outstrips anything we see in any business I've worked in, for example. Now, what this means is, practically speaking, the sum intelligence of the system is much higher than in a typical company. So if you got all of the brains of the managers and you mushed them all together into a pile, the sum intelligence of that pile of brains is much less than if you recruited literally everybody in the system. And so the lean system encourages a sum intelligence in the system, which is far greater than just the intelligence of the managers, which, relatively speaking, is fairly moronic compared to the masterful amount of intelligence of the whole organization. So we'll take away some of these bits. Next, we'll have a quick look at lean startup. So lean startup is something I know personally a bit more about. Steve Blank, a lecturer, gave Eric Ries many good ideas. He then wrote a book called Lean Startup, which has been consistently in all of the bookshops in sort of front row center in the sort of management section for the last 5 years or so. Now, the problem that they're trying to solve is that most entrepreneurial adventures fail because they produce a product which no one wants. And most of a venture capitalist's portfolio consists of ideas that are going nowhere. So in order to address this, they have applied the scientific method, essentially. So the scientific method is all about, your hypothesis and coming up with a test that you're going to do. And in Lean Startup, they're particularly keen to make sure that you decide on what metrics you're going to measure as a result of that test, and what actions you're going to take ahead of time before you test based on those outcomes. So if you decide ahead of time that if the value is greater than 10, you're going to do this, and if the value is less than this, you're going to consider it a failure, therefore you'll have to pivot and change something about your idea because your hypothesis seems to be wrong. So that's called an actionable metric, which is distinguished from a vanity metric, which is when you're measuring something in your business, in response to you measuring that, you tend to do nothing. It's just a vanity metric is what they call it. design thinking. It's very creative in producing products which are a much better fit for a certain problem. In particular, the thing that I took away was they're trying to use a lot of creative thinking, active efforts to creatively think and bounce ideas off each other and iterate and trial. Finally, there is Agile. So Agile has a lot of overlap with these other ones. They all overlap with each other. And it's all about trying to prevent the production of some monolithic piece of software which then turns out to not fit the bill and just fails to produce any value. So a lot of Rust Belt businesses will have one big waterfall type project. So for example, they will consult widely and they'll work out, for argument's sake, 8 things which are really important to get right about the project and deliverables and so forth. And then when you actually finish this monolithic project and you deliver it, you find that there are another 8 really obvious in retrospect things which weren't thought of, and the product doesn't deliver the value that you thought it would. Instead of doing monolithic style development, what they do is they start building components which can be delivered, and they try to deliver the most valuable parts very quickly. So they just have a very short production cycle, lots of little deliveries and customer feedback, so that they can tell whether or not they're delivering the value that they thought they would or not very early in the development. What we want to do now is we want to extract from these some sort of combined system. Now, I would argue that all of these, in distinct contrast to a standard old-fashioned project, all talk about iteration. So you cannot expect a waterfall style project to work like ever, okay? Because reality always is more complicated than is realized by wide consultation, which a project usually engages in. And it's much better, rather than to waste too much time doing that, is to deliver something which was very cheap to deliver to the coalface frequently, and get real feedback from these same people who are being consulted. So the best aspects of these, I've already kind of touched on this. The thing that we really want to take away from Lean is the idea that the sum intelligence of the group is much higher than the sum intelligence of the managers. The iteration, getting out of the building. So Lean Startup, the scientific method has been around for hundreds of years. It predates any business schools that I'm aware of, and it's stood the test of time, and it just makes sense. You create a hypothesis, you work out a cheap test that you can do, and you decide on what the different results that you might get mean ahead of actually doing the test. Actionable metrics. Design thinking, the big takeaway for me personally was the act of stopping and actively deciding, I am now going to creatively think. So, agile, rapid delivery, and so forth. So I'd suggest that these concepts, recruiting the full intelligence of the business and educating about how they can contribute, specifically stopping and creatively thinking, a la design thinking, iteration, all of them choose iteration over waterfall style projects. Waterfall style projects are just dumb. Scientific method, frequent delivery of small batches, get out of the building, they all have a bit of this in them, and repeat. All right, so I'm not an expert at these, so please feel free to pull apart my critique and comment below, like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.